Live from Rainspell Studios in North Hollywood, California, it's the Final Mix Show, the only radio podcast dedicated to educating you on the ins and outs of the music industry. And now, here's your host, John Mahoney.
Thanks, Ken. Well, welcome to another great episode of The Final Mix. Sitting in with me, as always, is my co-host, Mickey Finn.
Hello, John. How are you?
And tonight, super stoked. Been trying to get this guy for a long time, Mr. John Phillips. Welcome, John.
What's up? How you doing, John?
So, for those of you who have been living under a rock, John has worked with such bands as Sublime, Pepper, Slightly Stupid, Fishbone, The Expendables, Beautiful Girls from Australia, Revolution. Am I missing anyone there?
Aggrolites.
Yeah.
And Ivan Neville.
So, we got a lot to talk to about John. He is... this guy is one of those guys you'd be lucky to if you ran into a party and could corner him for 20 minutes and even scratch the surface of what this guy knows. So pay attention. But let's get started, John. I know you grew up in New York, moved to Palo Alto. Like, how old were you when you moved to Palo Alto?
I was 6 when I moved cross country from New York to Northern California. I actually moved to the South Bay and ended up going to high school up in the peninsula, Palo Alto, Menlo Park area.
Awesome. So then at age 7, I found this very interesting. Dad took you to Jamaica. Was that kind of a game changer for you?
I did get to go to Jamaica and was, influenced at an early age by reggae music and quite a lot of other albums and music my dad had turned me on to back in the day.
Right.
So your dad was a reggae fan?
He loved reggae. I remember he had one of the first original boom boxes with like detachable speakers and brought that down. It was 1976, I want to say, and brought that down to Jamaica and was, playing Confrontation and Naughty Dread and all those types of things. And I look back and I see my parents, the two places they took me as a kid were Colombia and Jamaica in the 70s. I'm like, what were you guys up to? Shit. Right? So, they listen to a lot of good music, let's say, too.
Uh-huh. So were you like, did you get to, were you going to concerts like at age 7 with your parents?
The first concert that they took me to was at Frost Amphitheater in Palo Alto, as you mentioned, on this campus of Stanford University, and it was a show with David Crosby and Graham Nash, and my first memory is that they were playing Teach Your Children, and my brother took a shit in his pants on stage, so it was sort of ironic and funny at the same time. He was 2,
Right.
I was 6.5, 7, and it's like David Crosby and Graham Nash up in the Bay. It was a good first show.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good place to see him.
And Frost Amphitheater, I don't know if you've ever been able to see a show there. The Dead used to play there a lot back in the day until they, the Bazaar and all the people that were there sort of infiltrated and got too popular. But it is one of the most beautiful, sort of pristine venues in the country.
Sweet. Well, I know, hopefully this isn't false information, but been to over 120 Grateful Dead shows?
I grew up in the Bay Area.
Right.
They're right around there.
Were you following them around kind of thing?
I never went further than like the West Coast,
Oh, okay.
But definitely,
You can see a lot of Dead shows in the West Coast alone.
They played there. Bob Weir went to my high school, actually. My Spanish teacher said that they kicked him out of there and stuff like that. And I actually look back, and he is in one of the yearbooks, Menlo High School, which is where I went. And, the band formed in Palo Alto right there as the Warlocks, and just so much folklore and history in that. And at an early age, high school, I was taken, to a show and sort of influenced a lot of what I do now in a lot of ways and opened the doors in so many different aspects of both music and the business. So I always think that the Dead is a great blueprint, especially for today's music model. I mean, they were doing it in analog,
Yeah, sure.
And it's, they existed for the pleasure of playing music and their fans' pleasure, and they were sort of existed outside the normal confines of the music industry. And there's actually a few cool books. I mean, I've seen this one come out about the marketing tips of being a Grateful Dead, whatever. But I forget what the title is. But it's good to digest and.
Right. Well, we both grew up in the Bay Area too. Were you involved much in like the Bay Area scene?
I was. from the South Bay. All my friends that lived down in Campbell and San Jose were like punk rock.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that's where I grew up. Was Santa Clara, Campbell.
shit, we probably
San Jose
know
area.
a lot of the same people, man.
Yeah.
So
I moved there in say 80, 81, something like that.
okay, yeah, I was 11, so was just sort of started getting into skateboarding and you know the subculture of what sort of punk rock and the whole DIY thing came out of, and so you know heavily influenced by that. I mean, in the scene, I was a kid, you know, so I was just sort of started to digest the music, and you know, in high school I went through all the different phases and whatnot, but you know, found that I love good improvisational live music like the Dead and other, you know, bands that sort of carry that sound, and reggae, obviously, as we talked about earlier. So all those things together, and funk, and it's sort of like been the makeup of, you know, sort of what music and what we've been doing as far as what I do now, you know.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, are you a musician? Do you play music at all?
I play guitar personally, you know,
right.
for fun.
Did it kind of start like that? Did you aspire first to be a musician?
My dad gave me, well, here's a good story, is my dad, who's not in the music industry, but he ended up being on tour with Willie Nelson in 76 or 77. And when I had first moved to California, I remember him sending postcards back home and being on tour with Willie, and they were taking him, you know, to Yellowstone National Park, and took him skiing for the first time. Wow. He was hanging out with Hell's Angels, and you know, he'd write back to our family and be telling us what he was doing and everything. You know, same guy that took me to go Jamaica and Colombia.
Right.
So
amazing.
You know, as far as that was early sort of, I forget what your question was, but
well, I was just wondering, like, we're you know, we obviously exposed to music at an early age. It had a profound effect on you.
Oh, with guitar,
Yeah.
I remember. So my dad had a Martin D18 acoustic that he got in 1970, and when I was, you know, probably 9 or 10, he gave me the guitar, and of course, you know, as a kid, I really didn't pay that much attention to it. It was before I really started getting heavily into music, and by the time I did, I was playing a lot of sports and whatnot, and sort of the guitar lessons and this and that became like sort of a backseat and sort of an inconvenience, and you just wanted to jam when you're young, and you know, I didn't put a lot into it, and I wish I would have more,
Right.
But I do play, and I've been playing for, you know, most of my life, and I had the pleasure of actually writing and recording a song with Half Pint, the reggae legend who actually influenced, you know, Sublime's music, and wrote a song for the Rolling Stones. But he actually stayed at my house for extended period of time, and just had heard me playing around the house and liked a few of the things that I had, and started singing a melody to it, and we put something together and ended up putting on his album. So it's the only like professional music endeavor I've ever had, and it was completely by accident.
Right. What I'm trying to get to is, you know, you're a super big shot now in the music business.
Am I really?
Yeah, you are. You've arrived,
on,
buddy.
man.
At what point did it become like, yes, that's what I'm going to fucking do. That's the career I'm going to chase. Because I know you were a history major in college at USC.
UCLA. Come on, let's
Sorry.
not make that cardinal sin. You know, that was, you pick a college, you go to school. I mean, I came out to LA because I knew I wanted to get involved in the music business, and I actually had a family connection to get involved at the early stages, you know, while I was in college to learn some things and be a part of the formation of a record label, and, you know, book shows on campus at UCLA, and get an early start at doing that sort of stuff, which is really my education. I mean, early on when I chose history as a major and to go to college, it was like I thought about music law, and I thought about this and that, and then I realized, like, I don't want to spend a bunch of money to stay in school for 4 years, seeing how much Keystone Light I can drink with the rest of fraternity row. You know, I want to get into this music shit and make it a reality. But I think you know, being part of sort of my family is in the music business. My uncle's, you know,
tell us about Uncle Randy.
Right. He gave me my first opportunity because he had a label called Gasoline Alley, which was a joint venture through MCA Records in the 90s. And when I decided to move out here to go to college, you know, one of the things I said to him is like, let me work and learn the business, and, you know, I'll do whatever I can. You know, you don't have to pay me. And he ended up helping me with rent, and I ended up working for the company and sort of seeing how the music business from the inside out really was working, just absorbed everything. I mean, the first advice and sort of only advice really ever gave me was just absorb like a sponge, you know?
Yeah.
And
that's what we want our listeners to do.
it's what you need to do is get firsthand experience. I don't think there's anything that you could necessarily do besides I mean, it's a whole new world now than when I first started, because it's so much about this new digital world and marketing and social networking.
Yep.
When I first entered the business, it was record sales and record labels. And, of course, my influence came from a lot of the live touring that I had experienced as a fan with the Dead and seeing how they had their audience and catered to that and sold from that and created sort of a cottage industry off of that, and a community really and a subculture. That's what inspired me, you know. And when I sort of saw that, I think me and my friend early on in high school said, you know, we're going to find a band like this someday and, you know, try to do this. And I was introduced while I was working at the label just as from an intern. I was just starting like a official job there, and a kid from Long Beach who become a good friend of mine, Greg Abramson, he had, you know, been hanging out with Sublime in Long Beach and basically was working as an intern at Gasoline Alley Records and was doing, it was an R&B and hip hop label, so that's what he was supposed to be doing, but he was really on their computers making Sublime cassette tape labels and flyers.
What was his name again?
Greg Abramson.
Okay.
I call him Groovy Greg.
I knew,
What's up, Greg?
Right.
He's now in the art business. He's at the Icon Art Gallery in Santa Monica, so
nice.
If you're ever looking for a Raymond Pettibone or Ed Rouchet, he could help
I thought you
out.
said Blaine, because I know you worked with Blaine, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, another name and face. But so Greg gave me a Sublime tape while we were in the office together. It was the cassette tape.
And what year is this, by the way?
This is late 93 or early 94.
Okay.
And he gave me the Jaw Won't Pay the Bills. It's a green cassette. It's a very rare cassette. You can't even probably find it to buy on eBay or anywhere else. It's a collectible. But it was Sublime's Jaw Won't Pay the Bills. And it was their demo or their record before 40 Ounces to Freedom even, and I just, you know, it was something so unique and, like I said, touched upon all the subcultures that were my early influences, because it had the reggae and it had the punk and it had hip-hop and it had the Dead. They covered Scarlet Begonias even. It was like, wow, what is this, you know?
Yeah,
and I
little
fell
blues, little everything. Huh?
Yeah, and I fell in love with it. And, you know, I went to a show down in Huntington Beach that was at some little hole-in-the-wall club, and there's 300 people there that knew every word to every song, and Brad's up there playing and sweating his ass off, and it was just something that was real, you know?
Yeah.
And you couldn't really deny that, and that's, you know, I just sort of at that point went on a crusade for this band and that sound, and eventually, you know, a year later, whatever, was able to bring it into the label that I worked for and sign it and A&R the project. That was
Gasoline Alley, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
Distributed through MCA, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
Universal, which is why those records, they come out on Universal still. But not without its trial and tribulations, and it wasn't an easy thing to get done. I mean, most of the record industry didn't understand the band or didn't want to,
imagine.
and the band was a punk rock at the core, do it yourself,
Punk rock attitude.
and they did not cater to the business. They did not kiss anybody's ass. I mean, in fact, they just burned bridge after bridge coming up. I mean, they were on drugs. They were fucking wasted. They were fucking, but they were artists, you know? And it's like they did not give a fuck. And I kept trying to tell all these people in the business, Sublime this, Sublime, you got, you know, and try to play them songs like their records. If you know the first one's like, it has 22 or 27 songs. They all interwoven. So you try to tell a bunch of suits, like, here, listen to this song. It's like they just couldn't get it, you know? And half the time the band wouldn't show up for the shows or, you know, play. I mean, I had half of Hollywood outside the Whiskey one time coming to see the band open for 311, and this must have been 94. And, you know, the rest of the guys showed up, and everyone was like, where's Brad? Where's Brad? And I was like, what do you mean, where's Brad? It's like, don't you guys, like, talk or roll together? And sure enough, they didn't show up at that show. And, you know, I mean, half the labels in town were there to check them. And
no.
Standard circumstances or abnormal circumstances, but they bred a lot of, you know, things, moments like that you go and think think back on, and it's just like,
Yeah.
it wasn't an easy thing. But what my point was is just, if you really believe in something, you just got to stick to it.
Yeah.
And a lot of naysayers are going to be there telling you,
Sure.
like, hey, man, this is shit, and it's not going to. And
Yep.
there's a lot of factors that weigh into it. So you just got to
Absolutely.
believe in yourself and your passion, and hopefully what you're representing actually is really good.
You know, we heard some of the similar information from Tom Zutat regarding Motley Crue and Metallica when he tried to bring them to the label.
Well, Guns N' Roses especially. That was the story.
Especially. But let's point out to our listeners that this doesn't work for every band in every situation, so don't think that that's the idea, is to just do whatever the fuck you want and not show up for shows. The point is to believe in what you're doing and keep working at it, and you'll hopefully
Good
get
point.
somewhere.
Because I think too many people I see in bands kind of go with that attitude. It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Romanticizing that sort of side of it is not going to get you very far.
No,
I
exactly.
mean, especially now, it's like there was a time and a place, and the glory days of Led Zeppelin throwing pianos out the Hyatt, and things like that. But I just feel like the music business and just society in general, especially as it pertains to like rock and roll and music, it's a lot more safer, sort of more corporatized.
Do you think it's kind of oversaturated? With the use of the internet, there's so many bands, and it's so easy for any band to get exposure that it's kind of like, there's way more competition out there now, I think, than there was 20 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you hope with everything and the way that sort of the internet communalizes things that the cream will rise to the top, but it's still a work in progress, and I think that it's an easier vehicle now for somebody to market themselves and be more in control of their careers. But like golden jackpot payoff, it just isn't there. I mean, when I first started working for the record labels, I mean, there's so much money. I mean, there's a whole economy in the bands that get signed and get these huge advances, and I mean, the record doesn't even come out. It's 6 figures spent on a music video. By the time it's said and done, $1 million plus is in the tubes. The band got their money. Their record never came out. And it's like that, and everybody is making money. Like the lawyers off the deal signed, they got their 5%, and it's like it was crazy how much money and how much profit there was in records and catalog.
Records
at that
just getting
point.
shelved.
There was so much profit in the catalogs these companies had, and an A-hit record, and it's different now, and those companies don't control the landscape the way they used to. Steve Jobs figured it out and beat everybody to the punch, and I think that it is very saturated, but I think there are so many outlets to find music, and it's like, I think for a fan, it's an amazing time to be a part of music. And as a band, I mean, you have to, again, believe in yourself and try to use all these tools and these things that are out there and be innovative. And, the
Ready
way
to adapt.
Yeah, the way to do that might not be not showing up for shows and getting so fucked up.
Right.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. Well, on that note, we got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, more with John Phillips. Stay tuned.
TuneCore.com is the #1 way for bands and musicians to sell their music to their fans. Get your music on iTunes, Rhapsody, MP3, and Music.com, and the list goes on. Best of all, keep 100% of the royalties. Try keeping 100% of the royalties on a major label. Anyways, go to finalmixshow.com, click on the TuneCore banner, and get your music sold all over the world right now.
All right, welcome back to the Final Mix. Sitting in with me and my co-host, as always, Mickey Finn. Our guest tonight, the great John Phillips. John, we left off at Uncle Randy, Gasoline Alley Records. So you essentially discovered Sublime single-handedly. With like an S
I
on
can't
your
say
cape.
single-handedly because I already told you about my friend that actually turned me on to the band. Who
You brought him to the label.
But yeah, I mean, he gave me the tape, brought him to the label, my uncle, and look, this is. I'm not going to do anything else. This is the band that has the possibility to break through on this sort of level.
Right.
It was right after Nirvana and Kurt's sort of major success. Maybe a year after that, I compared it in a lot of ways, and I told the label, I feel it could have a breakthrough on that level, and probably, the one sort of bet with the devil is that you're dealing with, heroin addiction and things of that nature that could self-destruct before they make the big record and all that.
Right.
So that was the risk, and it's like you sort of knew that with the personality of what you were dealing with, and unfortunately, it was prophesized in the songs, and it happened at the time we least expected it. But I value the 2 years that I was able to identify that talent and get a chance to cultivate and work with something that was so special and had such an impact commercially. Popular.
Did you ever think at that time, after Bradley died, that this many years later the band would still be so on top, on the radio and fresh on everyone's minds?
I always felt the music had that power, and I don't say that to sound conceited or anything like that. It's like I felt it, and I feel, look at what it permeated and how many people it did. And I think if there was a close group of us that were very close to the band that had a very, I think, deep understanding of rock and roll, and knew, that the ingredients were there for that to be something that could see that type of success.
And it's got to still make you feel good when you hear it and you hear people and you see shirts and you hear people talk about it, to know that you were part of that. It's got to feel good, yeah.
It's a validation for sure, and it's just, like I said, I'm thankful every day that I got to meet Brad and be a part of something like that. It's just one of those sort of, things that it's once in a blue moon, and it happened to me early on, and lightning struck, and it was the ultimate rock and roll roller coaster to start your career on, and to be the guinea pig. And there's a lot of bullshit you got to deal with in the music business every day: personalities, egos, artists, just the business end of it. And an artist like Sublime and Brad Nowell made that process worthwhile for me.
How old were you when that happened?
23.
Okay.
I was 26 when he died. And I was 23 when I met the man.
It was a quick but wild ride.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm interested in is, so you essentially brought them on to Gasoline Alley, already distributed through a major label. Was there that sort of thing, like where you had to talk another major label or other people into getting behind this band?
Most definitely.
And were they passing on it, and you were like, no, kind of
all of the above?
Yeah.
I
swear to God, it's like every goddamn band. I don't care if it's Aerosmith or whoever. It's like almost a rite of passage. Like everyone passes on you, and you go and you fight for them. Like, so tell us a little bit about that fight, and then how you finally prevailed.
Right. Well, I've told this story a bunch of times, so some of your listeners might have heard it, but the classic thing is that Sublime was like, the first time I took him to meet the label, it was supposed to be this like dinner, whatever, and the label was like, Gasoline Alley took every one of their artists to Genghis Khan Chinese restaurant. They wine and dine every one of these like R&B, and that's where they had the company dinners with the artists. And I sort of told them, I'm like, Sublime's playing Club Lingerie. They're playing with HR from Bad Brains. And I was like, we should just go across to the Cat and the Fiddle and grab some beers. Like, this
Cat and Fiddle, good place.
This is the type of guys, they were not used to this particular scene. The rock and roll that the people that I work with, my uncle and, the staff that was there, were definitely part of that sort of Sunset Strip heyday and Guns N' Roses and all that. But I just weren't ready for what Sublime was, and the personalities and, the somewhat of the adriftness from the process, and that the centrifugal figure actually was, in the throes of addiction and all those elements. So, they knew that, but like I said, don't take them to dinner at this nice restaurant. Let's just go get some beers and vibe,
Right. Yeah.
So the first dinner was like, we took them to the Chinese restaurant. And, Brad ended up staying in the parking lot in the pickup. Well, I remember he came in, he picked up, one thing was like, there's a 3-piece band, and it was 8 of their friends from Long Beach they brought to dinner with them to meet the execs of the record label. So Brad got the first bowl of hot and sour soup, grabbed the whole bowl from the center of the table, slurped it, this is in front of everybody, threw it down, heard a little banter, and next thing I remember, he was out in the pickup truck in the parking lot playing his guitar, and his friends were there, like, drinking beers and all this, and the label people were looking at me like going like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And the next thing you know, it's like chopsticks are flying and people are just like, and it was like,
really?
That was
you asked
like
for
a
it.
food fight kind of broke out?
Yeah, it's not even a food fight, but just a ruckus at the table with, LBC in the house and, to Beverly Hills record execs that, had like their last rock and roll success and sort of, well, they actually, it's funny because Guns N' Roses, you brought that up before, they have been in the offices. Gasoline Alley had a management company, Phillips, which was managing Rod Stewart. They had a stint with Prince, a lot of the sort of like 80s rock scene, and I think Guns N' Roses like came in and puked in their offices and they booted them, Yep. And they just didn't care. And the similar thing what I was getting to was Sublime. Sublime came in the office with their 2 dogs and, their cases of beer, and, it was just like they didn't care about the rest of what was going on or the process, and they thought they were going to come in, get signed in one day. Brad wanted his money to go, score, and it was like desperate. And I told him like, look, it's not going to happen like that. I mean, it doesn't behoove you guys for it to happen like that, But the label were busy that day, and they were too busy to actually meet with the band. So I was trying to keep them at bay in the office and find the opportunity, like, hey, Sublime's here, you know what I mean? Let's treat them right and see what they're all about, like, and that feeling out process. And they just got drunk in the offices. Their dogs were running around, shitting, pissing everywhere. They're drinking beers and getting drunk.
That's
and
classic.
I pretty much told the guys like, hey, it doesn't look like this, meeting is going to happen. So I gave Brad 2 boxes of the hot hit CD from Shy. If I Ever Fall in Love was a big hit Gasoline Alley at the time, and I'm like, here, dude, take these and sell them used back to the store if you need to go, if you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Get some money and shit, because they were hand to mouth, and, it was, and so we ended up being down in the parking lot, basement of the parking structure of the offices, and all the executives have placards on the wall that say their names for their parking spots. And so Brad and the band saw my uncle's parking spot, Randy Phillips, you know what I mean? It's like right there. And this like super like pimp collector's edition 2-seat convertible BMW that like the doors like flowed in, electronically sunk into the car. It's like one of like 70 that was made. Some toy that came out at that point. And they ended up taking this homemade Sublime sticker that was like the old KLOS stickers, and they slapped it on his car paint. And later that evening, I didn't know, they were talking about it. I didn't know that they actually did it. We parted our ways. Later that night, come down the parking structure with my uncle, leaving the offices, and there's his back of his BMW in his parking spot with this big-ass Sublime sticker stuck to the paint on the fucking ride,
Oh, my God.
And that was... they'll never work in this business again.
Wow.
And, I'll make a deal with the
Bad
devil.
idea number 113, kids.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, I called Brad and had to tell him the bad news. Was like, hey, man, you really fucked up putting the sticker on the car.
He's like, that's frowned upon?
He's like, no. He's like, you told me to do it, man. And I'm like, no, I didn't tell you. I didn't tell you not to do it, but I didn't tell you to do it. So
he actually asked you, and you were like, I don't know.
I don't remember. I remember them showing me the sticker and talking about it and all that, but it was.
You didn't want to be like the buzzkill, be like, what I mean, the babysitter, I guess.
I wasn't. I like to sort of let chaos unfold and sort of have a a natural process take place, and those guys were just being who they were. And
well, I wanted to ask you that because I've never even really seen an interview with Bradley. I don't know how that happened, and I've watched videos. But what kind of guy was he? Like, did he care? Was he? I imagine, and tell me if this is right. He was just all about the music. Didn't care if he had a hit record or if he OD'd. Like, he didn't really care about the record deal side of it, or did he? Or did he have?
There is that sort of, yin and yang that I think is, it's represented in their music, and even in the album cover. If you look at it, it's a sun that, like, is an image that seems happy and, representative of, like, something that's light. And when you look at it and you delve into it, there's, there's knives and, switchblades, and
he did sing a lot about
skeletons
love,
and skulls.
But was he a nice guy? Was he an approachable guy?
Oh, no,
if you
totally.
saw him at a party?
I mean, he was the quintessential, Southern California surf, play my music, you know what I mean? Soulful,
personable,
spiritual, highly intelligent. I mean, I think one thing their music gets dismissed as being sort of juvenile and being a party band and, you know, things of that nature. But I mean, he was a very well-read and well-studied and extremely smart, huge, expansive worldview. And I mean, it shows in the music. And yeah, I mean, like you said, he sings about the love, you know, and he definitely, there is that, but there is the reality of life and spirituality and all these other sort of, you know, things. And I mean, you know, there's, like I said, I mean, there's demons and there's angels, and it just represents, you know what I mean, the light and the dark, and it's sort of how he was too, you know. The dark side of it was, I think, in much of the case, you know, the drugs and the heroin and that speaking, because on, you know, the flip side, he was just really, you know, soulful and intelligent and sweet individual, and you know, like I said, I'm thankful and grateful for the time that I got to spend with him. It was too short, and you know, I love to have had more time, because he was just definitely an engaging and charismatic and intelligent individual.
Right. So your role, was it more just A&R guy, or was it manager, or was it babysitter? Did you have to kind of wear all those hats?
The funny thing is, when that dude Greg introduced me to the band, and I was at that point the label guy coming to check them out, even though we were all sort of the same age and we're smoking the same weed, and you know what I mean? It was like, I was like, okay, who's managing the band? They had like these, you know, people around them. I didn't know if Greg was managing them, and then they had Miguel, who's, you know, like the fourth member of Sublime, and he was doing their sound and producing their records, and he was managing them, and you know, it was just very hard. It was just chaos, you know, and it was one of those things where it was, when I got involved, I sort of, just like I said, I fell in love with the band and the music, and I pretty much just got, you know, was dedicated to wearing whatever hat I had to do to just try to progress, you know, things further for them and for myself, and just, you know, the process of getting their music discovered and noticed. So I wore pretty much from 94 to 96, I would say, every single hat that you could. And it got to the point where the label was I was in conflict with the label, because I was acting as a manager to the band and was their A&R, and I was fighting so much for the band's interests, which, you know, to me should be concurrent with what a label's interests are. And that's why I started my own label, which is, you know, so it could be like that. But in that, still, like I said, it was the tail end of that heyday of the record era. I mean, everyone was playing by the old rules, and you know, it was tough. You had to fight the fight to get what you needed, and a lot of times that agenda for the band differed than what was for the label. And you know, it got to be one of those sort of contentious situations, and even got to a part. Yeah, one time, I mean, Brad told me after the sticker incident. He's like, man, that's what he ended that instant saying. He's like, fuck the label, man, fuck Gasoline Alley. He's like, you know, you should just be our manager. And he's like, I know we're gonna do good, man. It's like, and so I was like, he's like, we'll just put that in the record Robin the Hood liner notes, because they were between 40 ounces and Robin the Hood, and we're getting ready to actually print the CD for Robin. That's sort of the time period I came to be involved in. So I'm like, now you don't have to put that in the CD, but good idea, you know. And my name's in the CD, and he didn't put fuck Gasoline Alley, I don't think, but we ended up, you know, steering the deal back in that direction, and it worked out. Water under the bridge. It sounds like there wasn't
that sort of ball buster character that I think every band has or needs, because I'm guessing that didn't work with them. Like, you know what I mean? It sounds like, you know, like
they were the ball busters. I mean, the bottom line is, like I said, that would be. There was no, I think, old, you know, the ball buster, the Peter Grant of Led Zeppelin. I mean, one of us would have been that. It's just a matter of, like, the band didn't exist for a long enough time. You know what I'm saying? It's like Jimmy Page and Keith Richards and all them rolled the dice with all that shit, but they survived. And, you know, I think you got to come up. You can't be of our age and just, this was the first, like I said, it was the first time for everybody really going through it, you know? And, there was, none of the major companies would really even take a look at the band. So it's like managers or whoever, people were sort of scared of the fact of, whatever reasons, drugs, or they didn't understand the music, or it wasn't like everybody. But they had their sort of run-ins with different people in the business, and it just never seemed to sort of work out.
So let's segue from the sticker incident, you'll never fucking work again, to the biggest band in the goddamn world, and go. How did that? Where did it start to go?
You left the label and you started your own label.
No, I stayed at the label at that point, and stayed in contact with the band because, like I said, they were like, just manage us, you know what I mean? And so I actually started shopping the band's music to all the labels, EMI, Warner's, Interscope, we were shopping around the business, and just because Gasoline Alley had told me they didn't want the band anymore, and I actually kept telling them, I'm not going to bring you any other bands really, because this is what I believe in, and it's like, you're not going to, and there was like a whole little scene that started surrounding the band, and they were selling records independently, so it was something that at a certain point it was noticeable, like, hey, there's something there, even if you didn't hear the hit single, you were like, this is something. So
and in essence, the band was doing a lot of work for you already, because they're already doing it. They're already selling CDs and selling out shows.
They weren't.
That's part of your job that you need to do to break a band.
No, for sure. I mean, they were the ultimate pioneers of DIY. They started Skunk Records on their own, and so much that when I actually ended up signing the band, I convinced MCA and Gasoline Alley to just let things flow as Skunk Records. Like, let's just invest money, we'll develop a team around it, but let's not sort of corporatize it, and let's, keep these records out for independent distribution. Don't make the process harder than it has to be. It's organic type of thing. And at a certain point, I'll work with the band, we'll deliver a third record that will have sort of all the tools in the studio for the band to produce something that would be ready for mass consumption. Not that those other records weren't, but it's and just the timing of it. Those were there were two records that ended up being years old. And 95 Date Rape ends up breaking off of the record they released in 92 because we actually started working it, and a buzz was happening. Someone at K-Rock got it, and it came from the street level, most definitely. There was no corporate entity that said play this shit, you know what I mean? It happened organically because we let it go organically, and the music was that powerful.
Well, on that note, I'm going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, more with John Phillips and some of the other bands he's worked with, and absolutely more advice. Stay tuned.
Django.com. Expose your music to millions of internet listeners worldwide. Best of all, Django.com allows the artist to target fans in their genre of music. For example, if you're a metal band that sounds like Metallica, you can literally target just Metallica fans. If you sound like 50 Cent or Jay-Z, you can target 50 Cent and Jay-Z fans. Go to finalmixshow.com and click on the Django banner to set up a free account and start increasing your fan base today.
All right, welcome back. We left off at Uncle Randy, Gasoline Alley Records.
Okay, yeah. Ultimately, the band showed up to our offices with a contract in hand from Atlantic Records because there was a scout there that was, had caught on and was interested. And I even remember Randy calling one of the guys at Atlantic, because that's who the scout was from, at some point, asking about what's up with the Sublime thing. And I'm like, going like, no, don't tell us, you know what I mean? Because I was just worried the band was going to get taken, and I was going to be asked out of like the thing that was inspiring me to like. So
did K-Rock have this in heavy rotate?
No, this hadn't happened on K-Rock yet. That happened after the band got signed. They were still just plugging along, doing their local shows down in the beach cities. They were drawing pretty well, but no one went to those shows except the kids down there. I mean, label people weren't going there. And like I said, I was trying to have them show up at places in Hollywood, like the Whiskey with 311. We got them a gig. That was a good show, I mean, both bands were still really young, and they didn't show up, It was just one thing after another. But they ended up coming to the label finally, because like I said, I still had kept this relationship with the band and was like basically helping manage their whole process trying to shop in the industry, and eventually Gasoline Alley came to the table, and that's what we ended up doing, and there's a million stories attached to that, but we did end up being able to get the funds to make the third record, with, I think, a lot of great producers, Paul Leary from the Butthole Surfers and David Kahn, who had done Fishbone, and we got to send the band out to Willie Nelson Studios in Texas, where they could get away from everything and have the cushion, the comfort of being able to actually record like that for the first time. And we also bought a lot of home equipment with the initial fund that the band did to set up their own home studio and work out pre-production and record parts of the record and whatnot. So it was a good move to just get those tools and have the infrastructure there to be prepared for the type of success that, like I said, I really knew that it could happen, and under the circumstances, it's not the way that we all would have wished that things happened, but
Did at the time that Brad died, how many records had the band sold, and did Brad know that it was like that? Did he die a millionaire? Were they that big by that time?
No, he died in May. It was just the anniversary of his passing, May 25th, and he died in May 25th of 96. The record didn't come out till August of 96. And then, what I got, the first single, ended up on 50-something radio stations right out of the box, and MCA sort of shook their head and went, whoa, we've got something, And, they almost didn't put out the record all after the fact.
Yeah.
I think the unique thing about it is that, you could look at all the annals of rock history, and you could look at Hendrix, Cobain, or any of these guys, and they, the icons that died at the same age Brad did,
no
27,
idea.
28, those guys Hendrix played Monterey Pop, Nirvana and Cobain were playing Rome and Czech Republic and all these places, 10,000 people arenas, and Sublime's biggest gig was the first year of Warped Tour, playing to 4,000 people in Boston or something, so it was
on a
still
side stage or something.
Very, very obscure, comparatively speaking, and if you look at the magnitude of the success, it's 15 million records or something. That's probably the most popular artist that no one or ever really got to see or know, or the percentage of the people that have bought the record compared to who have actually seen that artist has got to be one of the most skewed in history in terms of how little the percentage.
How many records has Sublime sold today?
Their catalog's 15 million records worldwide.
And still one of the most played bands on the radio. You can't turn on the radio without hearing Sublime.
It's classic rock now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
were you on the tour when they did their final show? Were you out there on the road?
Interestingly enough, I didn't, tour with the band consistently, but that was a run up to Northern California, where, like I said,
Phoenix
my roots
Theater, right?
and all that. And the whole run was based upon we needed to make some money. The band, at this point, actually they're touring in these markets post Date Rape in '95, right before the release of the second record. This is April now that this is happening. There's a great underground buzz, and the band is drawing people. At this point, probably they were going to play a San Francisco show that week for 2,500 people, so it was getting on the underground to be nothing other than the regional Date Rape radio play had happened on that level. It's just, it was rising up, and we were going to go to Europe with Pennywise, who were friends of the band, and I guess had been to Europe a couple of times. Sublime had never been. And they didn't have any records out in Europe or anything like that. We didn't have major help from the label, but we wanted to go and try to penetrate the market, and we needed to make some money to subsidize the trip. And so, booking a tour up to Northern California and back could yield a pretty good, payday for the band for a week's or so worth of work and help get them over to Europe. So, we booked Santa Cruz and Chico and Petaluma and those markets. And so I ended up going to Santa Cruz and Chico, which Chico was the last show that I saw him at. That was the day before the Petaluma show, which was their last show. And I actually detoured home to Campbell, San Jose area, because it was actually my mom's birthday, May 25th. And so I wanted to take my parents to their first Sublime gig. And I woke up on my mom's birthday the next day. After the Petaluma show, the band played that show. I made it home, talked to everybody. Everything was cool, good show. Apparently, the promoter of the show in Chico's younger guy from up there had given given Brad just a lunchbox full of dope, and he had already had it. He, took it for the Petaluma show, I guess, or something. We were always scared he was gonna have the Temptation in San Francisco. To score there, because artists always stay in the Tenderloin at the Phoenix Hotel. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think he died at the Phoenix Hotel.
That's what I heard.
But the last show was actually the Phoenix Theater in Petaluma, so that's where that sort of...
Where did they play in Chico?
Chico was actually in this quad that was in the center of downtown, and it was like... it's really cool, like sort of, staging, and they had, sword swallowers and fire dancers. It was a college sort of community event with all these that they put together and hired Sublime to play. And it's an amazing day, an amazing event. And Brad was so healthy at this point compared, like, he had cleaned up. Band was just sounding so tight. The record was about to come out. And, so like I said, they went and played Petaluma. We put them by the beach in San Francisco in a hotel, not in the Tenderloin, he didn't stay at the Phoenix that night, just so he'd be away from, being able to walk down the street to a dope dealer, like they're all over there. So, but he had already got it from the guy in Chico, and apparently, that night, was always that faithful, event, and woke up the next morning and he was passed away, and I got the call on my mom's birthday, the same day Brad died, that he had died, and that was it. But that day was supposed to be San Francisco for like 2,500 people at the Maritime Hall. Wow. And the journey in that respect ended.
So he died like in a hotel room out by the beach?
Yeah,
essentially by himself, or there were people around him? Or
apparently he was with the drummer and with Bud, and Bud woke up and found him there.
Wow, heavy.
Yeah, heavy.
Yeah, I know Mickey can relate to that whole story. Unfortunately, too many people,
fallen soldiers.
He lost his bass player that way.
Yeah,
so.
A lot of friends.
It's a tough thing, but the herb's so good these days. Stay away from the hard shit.
Exactly.
That's that's a good advice I could tell a lot of musicians, because Brad's music was definitely influenced by his experimentation, as so many artists were, but you could tell that he had it in the early days before he started using the hard shit and was drinking and smoking and having fun, and it's reflective of that. And you can tell when it goes darker, and but it's one of those things where I think that does get glamorized a lot, and
too much.
It's associated with success, and I feel like that definitely be smart just to fucking stay organic.
Absolutely. Listen, I think this is a nice segue into our tech corner called Picasso's Corner. Let Brian Kesselring take it away. When we come back, we're going to wrap up, and we'll see where it goes from there. Stay tuned.
Hey, I'm Brian Kesselring, a.k.a. Picasso, and you're in Picasso's Corner. So shut up and listen. So what I got going on today is the concept of considering being a solo artist, and I'm going to explain why. Because life in a band is like a marriage. It can be great, or it can be a pain in the ass, and ultimately it can fail. Because relationships are all about compromise, and that's a 4-letter word for many musicians. Well, some of us, it's totally written in our DNA not to compromise. I'll be the first guy in line to tell you that collaboration with a like-minded musician is its own awesome and special animal. And if you have that, worship it, love it, and just rock it till the wheels fall off. But when writing new songs, there's nothing like synergy, and hence collaboration. And for those of you who don't know what synergy is, it's the whole concept of 1 + 1 = 3 or more. So I've been there, done that a lot, Absolutely loved it. Would not have traded those experiences for the world. But if there's cats out there like me, which I know there are, there comes a point where you hit the wall with your compadres, i.e. bandmates, when the best you can do is agree to disagree, and that's on a good day. So sometimes in the life of a band, collaborators actually become conspirators. So the things that used to work for you may eventually come to work against you. And that kind of brings me around to the moral of my story. If shit goes south within a band environment, that is not the end of the world. If you have the desire, the vision, the drive, the work ethic, or even the ability to dare to dream, there's totally a light at the end of the tunnel. There's these fancy new gadgets called computers that allow you to play every instrument imaginable. Psst, without classical training. But that'll just be our little secret. And there's musicians for hire out there that won't have to be strapped to your dreams. They'll play for money, and then they're gone. So if you're in a good band, absolutely rock it till the wheels fall off. I know Mickey will agree with me on this one, but if not, and you find yourself in that spot, and your dreams are still scratching at your back, and you want to do what it is that you want to do, just believe. Because here's the deal. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. This has been Kikasso's Corner, and ciao, bitches.
All right, welcome back to the final mix. John Phillips in studio. So John, kind of wanted to get to, well, first of all, I guess congratulate you on Revolution. I remember talking to you, actually meeting you about this band when they were nothing, and now every time I open up the LA Weekly, they're playing huge shows. It seems like you've really been able to, you've kind of broken those guys, and I know how hard that is to do, so congratulations.
That's cool. They're one of the newer ones to be, and this summer is actually a cool culmination of a lot of what we've been doing, because Revolutions, who's one of our younger, newer bands, is going on tour with Slightly Stupid, who's, the band that Sublime actually passed down to us and said, like, hey, these are guys that we want to work with, and this, they've really pioneered it on a lot of levels and opened up the gateway for us to keep this thing going, and so finally this summer, those two bands are going to tour together, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, we're having very good success with developing what I think are bona fide talents and people that are trying to transcend the boundaries of a genre that I have, honestly, mixed feelings about a lot of it, because you ask, like, hey, does it surprise me 15 years later, right, that this band and Sublime and all this? And it's like, what surprises me is that, not how far that those particular albums went or some of the music went, but, like, actually how large of a, nation of,
what it spurred,
kids that are trying to, like, have a part of the sound and emulate that. Yep. And, yeah,
I agree.
That's really, really flattering, because like you said, how does it feel? It's like, wow, you were right. This thing that it's like influenced so many people.
And I mean, now this is your management company,
Silverback Management's a management company.
And you've got pretty much all the best of the bands in that genre, which you can be proud of too.
We're very selective with what we do, and you can take the volume approach and just try to, like, gobble up everything, which I think eventually killed the majors and stuff like that.
Right.
You can be selective, and for me, it's like the music that I support are, people that I love and music that I want to go home and listen to and rock my car and go to those shows, and it's like, it's a passion like that really drives it. And again, I mean, there's a lot of naysayers, and, the scene doesn't get really written up in the press, and it doesn't really get a lot of critical accolades, but, kids love real music and people love real music, and these are bands that have a positive attitude and mentality, and
we need more of that, don't we?
Yeah, and it's not like they're not without their conflict or their darkness or their it's not the happy. It's
still party music.
It's real shit, but it's party music, and it's like who doesn't. People are going to gravitate to that all the time.
And how many of these bands from your management are on your label? Are they all on your label?
Well, what we did is, we took on after Sublime management for Long Beach Dub All Stars. This is sort of the chronology: 1998 and Slightly Stupid, and. Me and my brother are partners, not my uncle or before, but my brother actually got into the business. He was instrumental early on street promotion for me for Sublime. Went to college in San Diego, introduced him to Slightly Stupid, took the bull by the horns, recognized like, hey, this is something I want to do and be, involved in, and sort of said like, I can do this too. He had the training, he saw what had happened, and
Right.
he saw that this was an endorsed talent that, could sort of carry the torch. And I was in the midst of trying to launch Long Beach Dub All Stars, which was the
Right.
band after Sublime that those guys formed, and so we actually were working with both those bands, but sort of separately. Him in San Diego, me in LA, and he was in college doing the same thing that how Sublime started, distributing records out of his college dorm room for Slightly Stupid, and he said they had showed up. He went to their record release show for their second record, and they didn't have any records there. So he's like, wow.
Right.
And he befriended the band, and had the knowledge and sort of experience of seeing what had sort of gone down with Sublime. Is a really intelligent guy too, and he just sort of started manning the ship, and we sort of started Silverback with Slightly Stupid in Long Beach Dub, and from there we attracted some other bands. Pepper came next. We met them in Hawaii and met them through a girl who had been working for me from Long Beach, who had been booking a club down there, and told me how much she liked these guys from Hawaii. So
yeah, great band.
Them and Slightly Stupid got along pretty good when they all met up, and Slightly Stupid sort of said, "Hey, we'll take these guys on tour with us," and me and Matt, my brother, looked at each other and said, hey, we should probably, get involved in this too. It's a positive thing. And Sally, the girl that was working for me, was wanting to like do something for the band and manage the band. And she had, so we sort of legitimized, her role, and we brought on Pepper, and Dem and Stupid sort of had a, what happened is Stupid ended up with a record that sold 60, 70, 100,000 records independently. And enabled us to start opening up discussions with independent distribution companies,
right.
And not sign a record deal with a major label, but sign a distribution
Right.
deal.
Yep.
And
Popular today now more than ever, I think.
and we were doing it out of necessity because none of the labels were looking at these
Right.
bands to necessarily try to sign them, and unless you had a radio hit or something like that already, and we were sort of pioneering things the grassroots way and trying to penetrate on every level, but and touring and all that, and things were growing a lot, and we sort of saw the value in keeping it, independent and just keeping our own stuff. And when you end up selling a certain amount of records independently, however we did it, we did. I mean, Sublime did at a certain point too, before they went big. You gained some clout in the marketplace, and we were able to negotiate a distribution deal through Sony Red. Red is Sony's like independent distribution company, right. To fund some records from our bands and give us, major distribution and sort of, help with the marketing part of things and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to, get Slightly Stupid and Stupid Records a distribution deal through this and get some funding for that. And we started Controlled Substance Sound Labs, which is our label side and distribution side of what we do. And we got Pepper, actually had a different sort of course. They ended up with a song on the radio, and they had been on the surf company Volcom's label, and then had transitioned to at that point like being an independent band, but stuck with sort of a bad contract, and we ended up with a radio hit 3 years later off of one of those records. We're able to leverage them sort of off of that deal, right. And onto Atlantic Records.
Right. One quick thing, nice segue here, and very important. I've been dying to ask you about this the whole episode. Radio, the single most important tool to sell records, to break a band. Is it still that kind of thing? Where is it at with radio and major labels and being able to still walk a record in? Is that still something that exists? I mean, is that still something you try to do?
We try to do it ourselves because of the success we've had and the unique sort of like type of success we've
But you
had.
have to be able to get the meeting, and you have the clout
That's
to
easy
get the
to do,
meeting.
but I mean, honestly,
It is easy to do.
the meeting for me is easy to get, but with radio, and it's not something, again, the politics of it and how it all happens and the limited sort of slots that they have there and the programming mentality. I always feel like we have contenders for radio.
What is the politics of it right now, though? What's your advice to someone that may be listening to this? Because honestly, I mean, to me, that's such a loaded conversation. But
it is.
Where are we at with trying to get onto the radio? I mean, is it because if you look at the stats, the facts are that the major labels dominate the radio, and I can't tell if there's still payola going on there or what the fuck is going on.
I think it's relationships that have existed over a long period of time. The indie, which is the guy that went in as the messenger and paid the money or got him the hooker or gave him the Coke or the refrigerator for their offices or whatever used to get records played that, people got indicted for and stuff like that, and it's outlawed now. That game exists. It's now, again, it's sort of more... It's, I guess, more regimented in how you do those things. But I think, again, it's like big money in a certain sense seems to get the...
It doesn't seem like anyone that's not on a major label...
gets a majority of a lot
You're not
going to
be on K-Rock if you're not on a major label. Is that fair?
We broke the rules and got stupid on K-Rock, and it happened, like I said, really organically. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over every record the band ever had that I went in there, was able to sit down with... programming and the top people and say, hey, here's what we're trying to develop, here's what we're establishing, here's the lineage to Sublime, the band that had a lot of history on your station, and that's what gets you in the door every time,
But you got to have clout to just even get that meeting.
There has to be this foundation, there has to be timing, you got to have the setup, you need to have...
They got to know you're going to go tour to support the record, right?
I mean, that's more important now, of course. That, I think, before is like they want to know you have the money in the marketplace to support retail, which was always a big thing. Hard retail, you know what I mean? And now it's digital download, so there's a whole different measurement. I mean, sure, records sell at retail, but increasingly, diminishingly. And so I think now they're starting to maybe look at all these other factors. I'm sure a band's Facebook friends and how many they have is something that a radio station is definitely going to look at as a factor.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, we have a lot of factors going for us, and I feel like, we're going to have success on every record, and, discretionarily, a single at radio, it's like having the right ingredient, the right song, you definitely have to have that, I mean, there's a certain song that works at the radio format that they're going to be gravitating to, and there's a lot of great music that isn't that,
What about college radio? What would you say to a band that's saying, hey, we're going to spend $5,000, do a college radio promotion campaign? Worth it?
$5,000?
Or whatever, $3,500, $5,000, whatever.
Is like, honestly, I mean, that's sort of the starter fund at a commercial radio sort of servicing now and stuff like that, because it's just gotten cheaper.
People never believe me when I talk about this shit. Am I lying? You could drop $100,000 on radio promotion, no problem, right? For like some guy who used to work at Epic or something, like has some success getting stuff. Like it gets expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I think a legitimate campaign for that is 50 to 100 probably.
Thank you.
It used to be probably a lot more and a lot more. I don't know that people are spending that same money as much. And I mean, maybe in the pop game, not in our game, the alternative format, be a little bit, but those aren't selling as many records. So it's like, I think the game it's leveled the playing field a little bit. It's probably not as much.
Now, do you do your stuff in-house or do you hire outsourced people?
We have Sony Red staff and we have third parties that we hire.
And they handle your radio promotion.
We start it. We try to support that virally if we can. We try to do what we can to get the records in front of radio. But at the end of the day, you have to be selective in what you try to spend that type or go for that, because you don't want to be chasing your tail going for some shit that ultimately is like your profits. Records, you know what I mean, at a certain degree. I mean, if you spend six figures on radio, you're not going to be making much money. But
let me ask you this too. What, is the music industry, are labels ever going to get a handle on illegal downloads, and how much do you think that's going to continue to impact artists making money from music?
They're trying, you know what I mean? It's like I have mixed feelings about all that because I know how much that file sharing and kids sharing this music has benefited what we do, and has benefited the touring and the human connection that these bands have with people, which ultimately, to me, as music becomes more and more like just wallpaper and is come and go, it's like I'm interested in the development of a lifestyle and of that relationship to a fan that's going to be a foundation, stick around for a long time.
Right.
And I think with that, maybe it's later in the career, but radio falls into place, and a big movie sync falls. If a band is good and you stick with it over time, this and that, and we know the holes to plug, and it's going to reach a certain plateau when it does, or a tipping point. And I think it takes a lot of years to get to that point and have success be real. That's the game we're playing. On the flip side of it, you want to throw something up against the wall and see as if it sticks, and there's a lot of people controlling that process, and it is what it is. And we, I think, exist within both worlds, but we straddle the fence, and we're gunning for that commercial success because at the end of the day, I mean, we all got to make a living too, and we want our music heard by as many people. Right. But I think,
do you believe that? I know you've had your dealings with major labels. Do you, where's your head at? Did it leave a bad taste in your mouth to work with major labels? Are you open to major labels bringing some of your bands to the next level, or are you like, no, fuck off, I don't ever want to work with a major label again?
I'm open to what's ever best for our clients and the people that I work with. So if I felt that a situation with a major could really help the group and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is, I certainly would never stand in the way of that. I would entertain, I would look at it from every angle. And so I'm not jaded to the respect, and I'm not self-righteous or anything about having to be punk rock or independent to where a lot of the sort of, I think, way you need to look at things, it's about developing a team. You got to find the right people. That's the bottom line. Yeah. So if that's a team that's at a major that's got some loot that they want to put in the right place and not lock the band down and have, an indentured servant type. The thing is now everybody wants a piece of everything because the records don't sell as much. And so that's becoming the new, call it the 360 deal, or whether, most of the contracts that we've seen out there that come from a major, there's definitely a percentage of the bands touring that they want at this point. And, that's their way of being able to pay themselves back on their investment. And I think if you're in that position, you really believe in something, you got to take a risk and make an investment that there's risk to, and that's how you can sort of prove that you're putting your money where your mouth is. And these other deals, it's like they're sort of like they're going to put out the money here, but take it from here. And, like I said, our bands are all profitable touring bands. That's how they make their living. And the margins on the record side of it, it's profitable as well. And they definitely make something off that. But that's the bread and butter has been the live shows. And that's how it's becoming for, most artists at this standpoint.
You were one of the first, speaking of putting your money in the right places, you knew that MySpace was dead before I heard anybody say it. What's the best bang for your buck out there right now in terms of advertising dollars?
Too provocative? Facebook, obviously, everyone's doing the, targeted Facebook ads, pop-ups and whatnot. Those, obviously are good because you can target certain things and it's a lot of eyeballs. And we... On the music side, we've been doing stuff with this company, Groove Shark, that has a lot of good analytics. And, it's a destination for music. And they're really supportive of artists. And they, like our model, and they see and they can recognize, what artists are doing, outside of the sort of confines of the strict, radio, all the traditional channels. This is like where things are going. So we've advertised with them if you're talking about advertising strictly. We advertise on lifestyle sites, for places that seem to target our core demographic, and whether that's like a surf line or which is affordable enough, you know what I mean, to be able to hit that, surfers check that shit.
Yeah,
you know
surf,
what I mean?
skate,
So,
all that.
We definitely have penetrated with the sound into the jam band world. So, obviously that's a very viral world, and it's touring, and it's, music online. And so, I mean, I think that's a place that, you know, we're obviously penetrating into and going, and you know, you got to feel your audience and feel what your band's about, and then hit those places that are appropriate for that shit.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, listen, I think we're going to have to, I could talk to you forever, by the way. I didn't even scratch this. I have a million questions.
We'll come back
very
for
informative. Thank you
round two,
so
the
much
sequel.
for being here. John Phillips, everybody. That's going to do it for us. Thank you. And as I always say, believe in yourself, believe in your dreams, because the only people that'll scoff on your dreams are those that have given up on their own. Good night.